This is a small group discussion with J. Krishnamurti at Brockwood Park, 1980.
The three graces. Dr. Bohm yesterday gave this cutting from a newspaper about the Japanese doctors experiment or investigating into the nature of senility, why people get old mentally. And they found that lawyers, professors, who else? Lawyers, professors, doctors don't grow senile so rapidly. But the farmers, the white-collar workers, and the rest of us go rather quickly. Rather quickly. So at table we were saying we should talk about this a little bit. That's how this took place, right? Dr. Bohm and I had a series of discussions at Ojai. They were very good. And I think you have the tapes here, haven't you, of it? Probably. And we'll continue some of that in September. Now, let's start on this. Our question was not, at table we talked a little about it, our question was not how not to get senile, but rather the cells themselves renew them. The cells themselves in the brain renew themselves, which is much more important than senility, I think. That's what we began at lunch, and we said, let's have a discussion about it after. So let's proceed, son. Won't some of you join in?
So the question that the mind doesn't degenerate if you use it is fairly simple to understand. It's like the muscles of the body, the muscles of the mind. If you exercise them, there's no degeneration. Or it's not as quick as it could take place if you don't do it. Then there is the question of regeneration, the renewal of the brain cells, which you talk about. But it also seems to me that a logical extension of this, if I may put it, and this is what I'd like to speak to you about this afternoon, is the question of reincarnation.
What is the relationship between that
Yes, I want to discuss. That's one of the things I want to
I don't quite understand why you bring in reincarnation.
So degeneration, regeneration and reincarnation is the same process.
Degeneration, regeneration, and reincarnation.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
I think you also said that there was some discussion you had at Ojai in which you stated that there was some evidence for reincarnation. And
no, that I stated. There was a question and answer meeting.
I wasn't there at the time.
No, there was a question and answer meeting. Instead of discussions and dialogue, we turned the whole thing into, they wrote out questions. We had about 250 questions. Couldn't answer them all, so we chose some of them. And one of them was answered directly to this question about reincarnation. There is some proof, according to the scientists, which that proof is, they're accumulating a lot of evidence. Don't hedge about it, answer directly, that kind of question. So we went, answered it. But now let's come back. Degeneration, regeneration, and reincarnation. What do you mean by that word, reincarnation?
So, degeneration, the
That I
senility
understand.
talked about,
That I understand.
is the death of the cells.
Yes, death of the cells and lack of making the cells be very active.
Yes.
Keeping the cells very active by, as the doctors say, thinking a great deal.
Otherwise, they cease to function properly.
Yes.
And eventually die.
Yes. So where is the connection between reincarnation and regeneration?
Yes. Now, you say, or this article says, that if the cells are kept active, they do not degenerate.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say that there is a transformation possible in which there is a mutation in the brain cells themselves.
Yes.
So that there is renewal. That's the word you use.
Yes,
Renewal.
yes. We've discussed this great deal about it, yes.
Now it seems to me that when the body dies, there's a certain degeneration of the body resulting in its death, like the death of the brain cells. There is no renewal of the consciousness, but there is a regeneration of it.
I understand that, but where do you bring in reincarnation?
That is reincarnation. That is what I want to ask you and go into it. Because you said at Ojai and once you said at Bombay at a public talk also, that to you it is a fact, reincarnation.
No. That was many years ago as a boy. I said,
No, sir, 3 years ago.
Yeah?
Yes.
I must have been a cuckoo.
And at Ojai you said it. You said you don't believe in anything, but to you this is not a belief.
No. I said at Ojai, if I remember rightly, answering a question that a great many scientists are now investigating reincarnation and they have evidence that's a fact. Some of the scientists, I don't say all the scientists. I was answering that question. Whether I knew for a fact or not. I said the reincarnation is not important, but regeneration is important. You follow?
That I follow, yes.
So I don't quite understand why you put the three things together. Degeneration, reincarnation.
So there is a physical death of the cells, brain cells. Like there's a physical death.
Are you saying can the cells in the brain renew themselves so that there is no death?
That's one of the implications, yes.
That seems rather...
Well, that's something else. But I think that there's a general belief or hope that when the body dies, the spirit somehow remains somewhere and reincarnates. Right? And I think the significance of the questions which were asked at Ojai, as far as I can see, is whether you had any direct knowledge of it. I think that
so
was really...
could we begin this way?
Yeah.
Would we agree or see together that our brains are not literally personal? That it is the brain has evolved through millennia, and it is the brain of mankind. It's not my brain.
I think that's fairly clear. You see, I think it's part of our tradition that though the brain may be common to mankind, there is an individuality beyond matter which is not common but which is individual. I think that is very deep in our culture.
Yes, very deep in our culture. But I question it.
Yes, well, that's what we want to do.
That's what we're doing now for the
Yes.
moment. Shall we? Is that what you want?
We'll start with that, yes.
Is our individuality merely a tradition an illusion, narrowing this enormous mind of human beings to a little self, me. Or this brain being the brain of mankind, brain of which has evolved through a million years or more, that brain is not an individual brain.
Yes, I think that, in principle, most scientists would have to accept that.
They would agree?
Because it has evolved in a certain form. And
yes,
DNA
that's what I'm
so
saying.
On, and through a
that's what
certain
we are
process,
saying.
Right.
Now, if we accept that, then where does individuality come in at all?
Well, yes, in there you can't see it, but there is a belief that there's something more than the brain, that mind is more than brain.
Yes, I know that.
And that possibly individuality is in the mind. You see, that's one in the soul, as people would say. And that's either it goes by reincarnation from one life to another, or perhaps only through one life into heaven or hell. Those are all the ideas that people have had, right?
When we say individuality, individual soul,
yeah.
Is there such thing at all?
Well, yes, that's another question. You see this would only be the brain question doesn't settle it, because people would feel that if there is reincarnation, this soul comes and takes possession of a brain. You see, and
I don't see that at all.
Well, I don't say it. I see it either, but I'm trying to present it, right?
I know. This is an old Indian tradition. Also, you would agree that Atma, it's the idea of reincarnation. I'm going to be next life. This life I've done good, therefore next life I'll be better, and so on.
Yeah,
it's continuous becoming till you reach the highest principle, Brahman, and so on. Isn't that right? Some of you Indians, tell me, please.
Yes, that's the Hindu tradition, but I wasn't talking about that or karma or the Hindu idea of reincarnation. I think there is a relationship between the regeneration of the dying birth cell or the brain cell, or the renewal of it. When you say it renews itself, what has happened to it before the renewal process?
Are you asking, can the brain cells themselves renew? Is that your question?
Yes.
Without any, what?
No. What I'm saying is there is a continuous deterioration. There's
yes.
always a state of entropy, a deterioration.
For most human beings,
For
yes.
most human beings. Now,
that's what the doctors are saying.
Now then they say that if you keep active...
That is thinking.
Thinking, yes. And we know it is limited, but still, it keeps it alive longer.
Yes.
Now, from what I understand you saying, that there is a transformation, a radical transformation possible, a mutation
in the brain cells
themselves.
That's right.
Where there is a renewal which takes place.
Yes.
And the brain cells stay alive, young.
Yes, that's
There is
right.
no deterioration.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
You are saying that.
We are saying that. That's right.
The last part you are saying it.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Where is your connection with reincarnation?
I'll explain, sir. There is, all right, let me put it this way. What happens to the consciousness which resides in those brain cells when the body dies?
What happens to consciousness? Now, wait a minute. Is that consciousness individual consciousness?
It is certainly manifested as individual
I question it. We think it is individual consciousness. Right? I say, my consciousness is this.
Yes.
But as though it was separate from yours and his and so on. Is that so? Or the content of our consciousness is common to mankind. And not a particularized consciousness. We like to think it's mine, but actually it's the consciousness of mankind, human beings.
For the moment, if we accept that...
no, I don't accept it. See, either it is so or it's not so.
Yes, sir, but for the moment, then why do you say it's only human beings? Where would you draw a line? What about the consciousness of plants or animals? How do you distinguish between that consciousness?
That I wouldn't go. I wouldn't know that.
So
it may be universal consciousness. That may be ultimate. We won't go into that. But let's begin with human consciousness.
But I think it's important to go into that. If you say your consciousness and my consciousness is part of the same consciousness, human consciousness...
If we agree to that...
I'm not agreeing to that, you see, because if you agree to that, why do you draw, or do you draw a line between my consciousness and the consciousness of that plant or the dog? Do you see what happens when
I understand your question, yes. But I don't quite see why you bring in the plants and the animals for the moment.
I will tell you why, sir. I am saying my consciousness is individual. You are saying, no, it's part of the same consciousness.
No, I'm saying something different, which is the content of my consciousness, right? There is no consciousness as we know it without its content, right?
Yes.
The content of our consciousness is my belief, my prejudice, my desires, and so on, so on, so on. That's the common ground or the common consciousness or content of all human beings. They suffer, they go through a great deal of travail, right?
Yes, sir.
So why do we call it individual consciousness?
Well, I think we should ask how does one see that this consciousness is not individual? You feel that it isn't. I mean, directly.
I say it is not.
Yeah, but there is a very great conviction, in humankind that it is, right?
I know that may be one up for illusions.
It may be an illusion, and
like there is God, yeah. Christ will save us, and all that. That's an illusion.
Now, if you say consciousness is not individual, then we could readily accept that it might well spread into animal.
Maybe, yes,
because they suffer, they have the same.
Yes, yeah, but leave the animals, right? For the moment and trees and nature.
I'll tell you why, sir. Because if one extends that logically, then one gets a separation between consciousness and that which is matter. Between life and death, sir.
I don't quite understand.
Is a piece of stone. One can now readily see how one can extend consciousness.
Wouldn't you say stone is part of that energy, which is matter?
Does it?
Would you say that, sir?
Well, that's matter, yes.
You're a scientist.
Yes, sir. But would it have consciousness as we understand it, or as a plant has consciousness?
Maybe, but I'm not for the moment, sir. We are only concerned with human consciousness. That may be included much later. You follow? Okay. If I understand, if we once admit that our consciousness with its content is the human consciousness. It's not individual consciousness. Though I like to believe, or one likes to believe, it is individual consciousness. I say that's an illusion, that's not so.
I think we'd have to understand what this feeling of individuality means. That is, to a certain extent, each person is a kind of center of some kind of energy, it seems to me.
Yes.
That there is some meaning to it, but not
so
absolute.
Common, say for instance, I'm self-centered human being. and so is another. And this self-centered being is always trying to retain its own limited consciousness, right? Right? Would we?
Yes. Well, I think that you could say that in the beginning there's a certain part of consciousness which each human being has that belongs to him. He has his own area but he is extending it to cover everything, saying that separation applies, fundamentally.
Yes.
And not merely as a...
That's right. I'm saying fundamentally our consciousness is the rest of mankind.
Yes, that's the point. And
that's my part. I won't budge from that.
But,
I mean, not budge. I see it as truth. It's as a fact.
Are you saying, sir, there's a reservoir of consciousness?
No. Sir, I don't see the difficulty in this. Human beings suffer right through the world, right? They are greedy right through the world. They are arrogant there, and so on, so on. That is the content of our consciousness, right? Of all human beings, whether they're in India or Moscow or America or here.
That's clear.
So I say, where does individuality come into this?
Well, I think, so you're implying further that this suffering is fundamental. You say that it is a fundamental part of human consciousness, compared that the ordinary sort of thing that people identify with is rather superficial. See, somebody might say, look, I have other content besides suffering.
Oh yes, perhaps you are a scientist, or I'm a lawyer.
Yes, and I have that content or some other.
Yes,
family.
but all these contents make up our consciousness.
Yeah, and you have to say they're all similar. We say they're all similar for mankind.
Yes, similar to mankind.
But people feel somehow that their own is different. You see, this is the illusion. That somehow...
I know they feel... I mean, that's the whole tradition both in India, here, in the Western world. That's the tradition. But is that a fact?
Yes, well,
the very word individual means undivided.
Yeah. Well, when you go into it, as we've been doing here, then you can see that that this difference, you try to find out what this difference is, and it begins to go away, right? You
what is this difference? What is this difference to which we cling to?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Is it physical? Mm-hmm. Because you are fair, I'm dark, one is black, one is yellow, one has black hair, and so on. So is that what makes individuality?
Yeah, some people have said that, saying, I belong to this race or this group, this
family. Group, I understand all that. But is that individuality?
Well,
the name and the form and the country you're born in? Or some talent by some accident or whatever it is you have. Is that individuality?
What you're saying is fairly clear, but I want to extend...
Is self-centered individuality?
No, that is clear, sir. It is not.
If you once admit that...
Yes.
Then what does reincarnation mean?
This is what I want to get at, sir. Supposing supposing I die, what happens to my consciousness? 1 minute. That's the question. When one talks about reincarnation.
You put a wrong question.
I'm coming to the second question. See the logical. You say that it's part of human consciousness, right? Supposing every human being on this earth died, would human consciousness die?
Oh, that's an impossible question to ask.
Why, sir? It is...
Nobody could die all at once. Come.
No, supposing it happens, sir.
Atomic bomb.
Which could happen. What happens to human consciousness?
As long as human beings exist.
See, that's the danger in it, sir. Therefore, it is necessary for a human being to exist, for consciousness to manifest itself.
Of course.
And that...
Not manifest itself. It is there.
As long as the human being exists.
Of course. If it's once you admit, either logically and rationally, that our consciousness is made up of its content, that's one fact.
Yes.
The second fact is that all human beings have common consciousness, psychologically, have common consciousness. If you once admit that, right? As a fact, not as a theory or a supposition or a belief, as a fact, then where does individuality arise? As Dr. Bohm points out, it's our belief, it's our desire, it's our condition.
I'll tell you where it arises. So isn't it possible to change human consciousness? Can't the individual change, the individual physical human being with his particular brain, cannot he have an effect on total human consciousness? Can't he change it? Can't he interact?
I don't quite follow what you're saying.
The way I think, the way I behave, does it affect human consciousness?
Obviously.
So the individual actions affect human consciousness.
So, if I'm a Catholic, conditioned for 20 centuries, they're part of my consciousness. As a Hindu, you are conditioned after 5,000, 3,000, that's part of your consciousness.
That's part of human consciousness.
Human consciousness.
Because when you say part of my consciousness,
No,
it's individualized.
I said human consciousness.
Human consciousness. Now, human consciousness is manifested in human beings who alter it.
No. You see how we... No. So join in, please.
Sir,
The game is
may I
open.
ask, where does consciousness reside other than the human cells?
The what?
Cells, and possibly, where does this human consciousness reside other than the human brain cells or possibly the genetic...
Are you asking where does consciousness exist?
Yes. Is it only manifest in the cells, or does it have an existence other than what goes on in the human brain cell or the genetic process?
Yeah, is consciousness more than material? You see, that's one question.
That is the question, really.
Yeah.
That's where Asid's question, if everybody was dead, would there be any consciousness floating around somewhere, or does it only have its life in the human cell?
Of course.
Of course, to what sense?
Huh?
What's the answer?
Well, of course. Which?
Now let's get back to work. What are you telling me, asking me? First of all, sir, let's be clear on this point. The content makes consciousness as we know it. If there is no content, the consciousness as we know it would be totally different. That's all I'm saying. That is the actual mutation of the brain cells. Right? That's what I'm saying. Not where it resides. I mean, it resides as a psychic process. You can't beat me down. Go on.
No, sir. A human being is alive because he's conscious. There is a content of consciousness in him, physically, in the brain cells.
Now let's go very slowly. Is that so, sir? What are you saying?
We'll come to the mutation which you talk about a little slowly, sir. I am alive.
Just a minute, what I said is very clear. That as long as the content which makes up our human consciousness, in that area, there is change, there is not mutation, not transformation, there is modification going on all the time in there.
Yes.
And however much modified, it is still part of the old consciousness. Therefore, we are saying, in that process, there is no transformation, no mutation. It's only mutation takes place when the content is totally empty of all its content. I think that's logical.
1 minute, sir. What you are saying is a human being who's alive has a certain consciousness, which you just now called the old consciousness. When his brain cells become empty of that,
empty of its
content
of consciousness.
Yes, because consciousness is its content, so empty of consciousness.
Yes.
Then you say that it's a mutation takes place.
Yes.
That is the transformation of the brain cells.
Yes.
Okay. Now, before we come to that, I want to ask you another question. When a human being dies, surely the brain cells become empty of consciousness, or don't they?
Human being dies, what happens to this cell? They die.
The cells die. What happens to the consciousness?
This common consciousness goes, it is you see, you are still clinging to the idea of individual. That's where it is.
No, so I'm coming to something, sir. Because what you are saying takes place in a living human being. Does the same thing take place at death? That's all I'm saying.
What?
You say that a human being who is alive...
Sir, a human being who is alive is self-centered.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
The part of that self-centeredness is consciousness.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
When that self-centeredness is not, there is total mutation taking place. Which is, as we discussed it all with Dr. Bohm, which enters into quite a different dimension.
That's right. So that is what you have said.
I repeated umpteen times.
Yes. We can go into that, how this mutation takes place, or the process of mutation.
That's a different question.
Different question. I'm saying that if you don't go into that, if you don't go into what happens...
Yes, I understand.
Essentially, the mutation takes place, according to you, when the content of consciousness does not exist.
Yes.
That's right. Now, I'm asking, when the physical body dies,
yes,
either of two things happen. The content of his consciousness dies,
no,
or it remains alive in some form.
No. You see how you are thinking. If I die, and I'm still holding on to my attachments, wounds, beliefs, is my consciousness, which I have reserved for myself, which is an illusion, that consciousness remains, because it is human consciousness. I don't know if I'm making it clear.
Not too clear. I mean, if you say it remains, then I tend to ask, next question is, where does it remain?
In the rest of mankind.
In the rest of mankind. But see, if we could see how, is it through the effects which you have had?
What?
Does it remain there because you have had effects on other people?
No, sir. I don't know, what's the difficulty? I don't quite say difficulty.
No, I think if you say that there's a certain consciousness in a certain brain, right?
First of all, I said our brain is the result of million years.
Yes.
Therefore, it is a common brain.
Yes.
It's not my brain.
That's right. But you can say there's one brain to be distinguished from another, just simply not belonging to anybody, but we're just distinguishing them, right?
Yes.
And saying the brain in a certain person dies, and
yes.
you say the brain cells disintegrate, so
yes.
that content would vanish. That's what would look
but
like
it's
scientific.
But there is the universal
That's right.
human consciousness going on.
Yes, we understand that by saying there are other people around who are still
yes.
conscious.
Yes.
Right? Now, the question which is not clear is the content which was in this brain which has died, how does it remain in the others, you see? Do you see the question?
What?
Well, look, if this, suppose you say that there's a content in a tape recording. If you destroy the tape recording, it's gone, right?
Yes.
The other tapes are not affected,
No.
right?
No.
Well,
That's not a good simile.
But I mean, it hasn't come out clear yet. Then, see, why is it that when this one goes, the others are affected?
So, would you admit that our brain is not individual brain, but the brain of humanity?
Yes.
Just a minute. Would you agree to that?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes, but we'd have to understand that more deeply. You see, that in one sense it's not individual because it has developed, by a process that has grown up all together.
Which is common to mankind.
Common to mankind. But there is the further point that you say once it has developed, it's in a certain material system. The other brain is over here in another material system, and it seems they're only connected by physical actions. Do you see the problem? That we say it's true, the brains have all come from a common source.
Yes.
But now they have developed in various places. And now if this brain dies, it seems it's no longer connected with that brain.
Yes.
And therefore, the dying of this brain, I would think, at first sight, would just simply be the vanishing of its content.
No.
All right, why not then?
Because it's common to all mankind.
Yeah, so then you're saying that even that there's a connection which is beyond the physical connection.
I understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
Are you trying to say our consciousness is not material?
Yes, well, that's what's implied in what I think that's implied in what you're saying.
Desire is not material.
Well, that may be material. Desire, consciousness is both material and not material. Let's put it that way. It has two sides, right?
Is that so?
I don't know.
Is our consciousness both material and non-material? What do you mean by material?
Well, that's simple. It's something going on in matter. You see we say that the content is impressed on the brain cells, and if somebody thinks, as the Japanese doctors have shown, this means at the same time the brain is physically active. The blood. It has been proved that whenever you think, the blood moves all over the brain. That has been observed.
Yes.
So as you think, the blood is moving around, stimulating the brain. All sorts of things are happening. So we say that's a material process.
I understand.
There may be much more subtle material process.
There's much more subtle than that.
Yeah, so that's very crude.
Yes.
But with science can only investigate some very crude things at present.
Yes, I understand that. So what is the question?
Now then the question is, most material processes have this character that what's going on here in one place does not directly affect what is going on in another place, except through some connection that could be seen, like light or sound.
Yes.
Is that clear what I mean? So if this brain dies, or whatever happens to this brain is communicated by another material process, such as talking or making signs. And if this brain dies, what happens to the other brains? You see, that's the question. How does it ever affect the other brains?
You see, sir, when I am alive...
Somebody come to my aid.
I think there are two things in this. If I understand,
sir. Come out here and sit.
If I understand what Asit has been saying, you see, if you say consciousness is human, I think Krishna is implying it is psychological. All the brain functions. The consciousness is human is a psychological statement, a psychological tone. But I think I as a physical entity, I have a separate body. So I am beginning to think that because I have a separate body, I have a separate consciousness, which is also true. Now, if you say...
When I go, you're talking.
Now, I think I have a separate consciousness because I have a separate body. It emanates from the body. But the fact that consciousness is human is psychological. I think that's where the difficulty comes in.
Is that so?
Well, it's related
Because it's self-centered, there's an identification with the body, or with the brain cells, or the way you think. Is that what you
No,
see?
I'm getting at something else. When the human body dies, consciousness remains. Krishnaji said that just now.
Of course, because it exists in you.
Because Krishnaji is saying that consciousness is always human. It has nothing to do with your personal entity either being present in the body or not.
So it remains.
Yes.
One question which arises, what happens to it? Where does it reside? Where does it remain? While I was alive, I knew where it was. When I die, what happens to it? That's one question.
No, when you say when I die, you are emphasizing the I.
When the body dies.
That's better.
When the body dies,
yes.
what happens to that consciousness? Where does it reside? Where does it go?
What do you mean, where does it reside? Where does it go?
Does it continue to exist?
Of course.
It does. Where?
In the human beings.
In other human beings?
Of course.
So what is this process by which consciousness communicates with other human beings or enters into
I
other
don't
human
understand this question at all.
Sir, it's simple. If the body dies, my body dies, this body dies, my consciousness, does it go to
It is not yours.
The consciousness which resides...
It's not yours. From the beginning I have been repeating that.
Sir, you must agree that there is a certain consciousness which is operating in the brain cells here, which are physically located
First,
in the
sir,
body.
do you admit not that our consciousness is common to mankind? It's not yours.
Yes. In terms of sorrow, greed...
That's all.
right.
In terms of its content,
It is common.
common
Yes, sir.
to all mankind.
Yes, sir.
That's all.
No, sir. No, that's not
We proceed from there.
Yes, I'll proceed from there. Now, sir, a human being contains consciousness, that human consciousness. His brain cells contain it.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
But
wait, careful, what do you mean contain? In the sense they hold the memories
Yes, sir.
of the content.
Yes.
That is greed, envy, beliefs,
Yes.
rituals, dogmas, nationalities,
That's right.
all that.
They hold the racial memories, the collective human memories,
All that.
and the particular memories of his life.
Wait a minute, what do you mean by particular memories of his life? I refute that. You see,
No, this is the key point,
that is the
sir.
whole point.
That is the key point, sir. It holds the collective racial memory, the collective memory of the human race. It holds the collective memory of his race.
His beliefs, his
His beliefs.
superstitions, his illusions, his gods, his Jesuses, and all the rest.
And the particular memories of his particular
I
experience.
question that.
But sir, you have said that someone like Hitler or Stalin affected the consciousness of mankind.
Yes.
Now, it isn't identical with the effect.
No, of course not.
of
But there's madness in him. There was madness in him. And wait, there's madness in all of us.
Yes.
We're all partially neurotic.
Yes, but it is not an identical effect.
Of course not, because he was brought up in Austria, circumstances, all the rest of it.
A certain particularity to a consciousness that is not identical with the next fellow's.
You see,
What happens to that?
I don't see your
Well,
difficulty.
you see, let's take Hitler. You say that he had a certain consciousness, that person, right, and which developed from his background. But now, let's say Hitler died at a certain moment. Now, see, we can understand that Hitler had a big effect on human consciousness by what he said.
No, he has had big effect on human consciousness because we partake of his consciousness.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say, how we partake of it, is the way it looks at first sight. some of us may have been present at meetings where he spoke or watched films or read his books.
Yes.
So we can understand partaking of his consciousness because it's communicated in a way that you can see physically.
Physically, yes.
And that is very clear, you see.
Yes.
That now all of us share that consciousness because other people picked it up and passed it on, and so on.
And also, sir, we are partially neurotic as he was.
Yes, that's why we can share it, you see.
Yes, that's all.
But so there is a logical difficulty in this. See this. If you are part of this, if all human consciousness is the same and we are part of it,
Yes.
then whether Hitler had lived or not would make no difference to human consciousness. See the logical difficulty there, sir.
I understand that.
Because whatever was in that human consciousness, let me use the words I want to use. Whatever was in that
Yes, sir,
human
wait.
consciousness, the evil that was in it was incarnated in a particular individual who was able to do what he did in his life. That affected human consciousness. But if it had not incarnated in Hitler, would it have affected human consciousness the way it did?
Has Hitler really affected human consciousness?
Of course, sir.
I question it.
Well, it seems you're
I don't
contradicting
question
it.
that.
You know.
Huh?
Of course he has affected.
Tell me how.
Sir, the way the world thinks is different now.
What
after
has
Hitler.
changed?
The level
Geographic? Breaking up Germany?
That has happened, of course.
What has changed in human consciousness?
Well, this
He was a
depends.
violent madman, and we've got that streak in all of us. Only his was exaggerated, and that exaggeration took place because of circumstances, Versailles Treaty and all the rest of it.
Yes, sir. But isn't there a much greater awareness of the dangers of what can happen? Whether one
Which means
succeeds
what,
in-
sir? You are much greater danger of what?
Danger of a person like Hitler, awareness of what can happen if an individual like that gets control of what he got control of, and the means by which he got control of it, which surely has affected human consciousness, sir.
But there are already other minor Hitlers.
Yes,
all
I
over
was
the
going to
world.
say that. The fact that we have not been able to prevent other Hitlers does not mean it hasn't affected human consciousness.
I question this
that he affected
altogether.
through what he did, through the deeds, through killing people, making people suffer, war, etc.
There's been
That
Genghis
those-
Khan, just a minute, Genghis Khan, Attila, Stalin, Hitler.
But do these people affect human consciousness through their deeds, their words, etc., or is it a sort of psychological poisoning of the human consciousness?
That's
that
all I'm
goes on?
saying.
Which of those two?
As long as I am saying the content of my consciousness, which is the common to mankind, if in that consciousness there is an exaggeration, that exaggeration is part of this consciousness.
But how did it get exaggerated?
Because of circumstances.
No, that is the point, sir.
Is
That
it?
is where the individual consciousness comes in, sir. From the
No, that is, look,
Please, sir, may I say something? From the same human consciousness, you get a Buddha and you get a Hitler.
yes.
So you have two.
Wait. The Buddha, we are subsuming that, was not self-centered.
So he
Wait,
might have
wait.
transformed himself, but
Wait,
to
that
start
is the
with,
point.
but to start with, he came from the same human consciousness,
He started from the same human consciousness.
and Hitler started from the same human consciousness.
Yes.
So, sir, the individual action of the man Hitler and the individual.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Sir, the individual action of the.
It was not. You see, you're back to individuality.
It has to be, sir, because the Buddha as an individual transformed himself, sir. Whereas the Hitler as an individual
Wait, sir.
gave tremendous
Wait,
focus
sir.
to
Wait,
evil.
Sir. No, Buddha transformed himself. Forgive me for speaking in the name of the Buddha. Transformed himself, or rather, moved away. You see these all words which connote wrong. He, as an entity, he put away all human consciousness.
Could we leave the Buddha
But wait,
aside?
but Hitler kept the human consciousness and exaggerated one part of it.
That is, when you say exaggerated, it means the individual can...
No! Why do you call it individual?
Sir, I will explain, sir. There is in all of us a part of Hitler, right? And part of
Hitler,
part of evil, part of anger, greed, or everything. If in
I see, what I'm saying is, as long as the content of human consciousness, the content which makes up our consciousness, exists, these incidents will take place. But don't call it individual.
I see. You are saying that it could, one particular facet could concentrate itself in one person.
Yes.
And
not one, yes.
In one human being.
It happens in the way we look at...
In a human being.
In a human being, all right, sir. A facet, say evil or anger or greed, could together with certain abilities, could concentrate and produce a Hitler. But it has not changed human consciousness.
It is modified.
It is modified. It is
not changed.
Not changed. So individuals can modify human consciousness.
No, you see, you are introducing the word...
Or human beings
can modify
human consciousness.
Yes. But it remains human consciousness.
It remains human consciousness.
But does it remain the same level of evil, greed, etc., etc., etc.?
Yes.
Or does an evil human being add
more evil? I was going to use the same word. Add more evil to human consciousness.
Of course.
Rises.
Then, sir, human...
Wait. Catching my arm, not so. No, sir, just a minute, sir. We are going round and round in circles.
No, yes. We are, sir, but it's important to understand.
I understand your question. I'm watching it very carefully.
I think you keep on going back to using the word individual, or human being.
I won't use that word.
Well, I mean, the human being can be used in that sense. But the word human being may be used in the sense of individual. See, we have to say the human being, to be consistent, is not an individual, but a kind of focus of all these energies. And this human being focuses the energy in a certain way, and through doing that, it affects the rest.
Yes. Now, this human being can change the amount of greed there is in human consciousness.
Well,
I don't. This is steady.
This is.
Well, then that.
I want to be clear what you said, but I might have foolishly agreed. I'll be thrown out my right.
So we said, if there is a concentration of, let's call it evil, in human beings at a certain time, and can that concentration raise the level in the totality of human consciousness toward evil? Or toward whatever?
It's a modification.
Yes.
There's always modification going on within that area of consciousness.
Yes.
Always going on. Exaggerated, not exaggerated, but it is still within the same area.
But sir,
wait.
What is the modification? Can we call that an increase in a particular...
I wouldn't call it increase, or it's a modification.
What does that mean?
Adjusting itself to environment.
No, sir, supposing I spend
modifying itself, changing itself, exaggerating itself, and coming down. This constant movement is going on.
So supposing I spend my life...
I'm right, I stick to that.
Wait, sir. Supposing I spend my life hating people and...
What?
Supposing I spend my life hating people and hate...
I know
and
several
anger
of them.
grows in me.
Yes.
Does that increase the amount of hate in human consciousness?
Now you're putting the wrong question.
No, sir, but it's worth following that question.
I know it. Yes. You see...
Because then one comes to, is it possible to distinguish between evil and good? Evil could manifest itself in many ways. At the moment, let's take hate, anger, that sort of thing.
Would you admit good is unrelated to evil?
So we can come to that.
Hey, no.
We'll come to that, sir. I'm just asking.
Oh, sir?
Well, I think that, you see, this business of measuring good and evil is really
very dangerous.
impossible. You see, that that the good which could be measured against evil is not ultimately distinguishable.
No, absolutely.
What I'm coming at, sir, is that ultimately there is such a thing as individual action. That's what I'm going to try and prove.
I say there is
I know
no
you're
such
saying there is.
individual action.
Sir,
It's
supposing
a common action of mankind.
Can I
supposing
ask a question at this stage? Is it? We seem to be saying that consciousness exists in the individual. Wouldn't it be more correct to say that?
What? Sir,
Can I say the other?
what do you mean by the individual?
Don't use that
That's
word.
really what I'm asking. Sir.
Don't use that word.
I don't use that word. I'm ignorant of that word. Tell me what it means.
Wouldn't it be more correct to say that the individual exists in the human consciousness?
The idea of an individual exists in the human consciousness. Like an illusion, it exists in human consciousness.
And it isn't that there is, and part of the idea is that within this individual, there is something called consciousness.
What is this? What is this?
Well, that's it.
Huh?
It's a further development that the idea is that there is an individual, and this individual is the one that contains consciousness. That's the way one comes.
Yes, sir, yes, sir. This is going round and round in circles.
But
Look, do you concede that there is common similarity of all human beings?
Yes, sir.
Huh?
Yes.
You admit that?
Yes.
Then where is the individual? Because you have a
It's just
different
an
body?
idea.
No, sir.
I refute this whole idea of individuality.
Sir,
That's
there is individual action, sir.
you see, I think, try to put it, that although there may be similarity in human beings, you see, the common impression is there's also a difference. You see, it's not enough to point out similarity, you must refute any fundamental difference.
Is there fundamental?
That's the question. You see that
That's
people,
what I'm...
people commonly believe there is one, right?
Yes, sir. Let's discuss that. Is there fundamental difference?
There's difference of degree, surely.
Huh?
There's difference of degree. You know, a culture may be
Yes,
more or less
different.
happy.
I may suffer more, you may suffer less, but it is still suffering.
You see, some people would say there's a difference that some individuals say, you say it's talent, say some individuals have had a creative spark or something. You see, they like to say that...
Sir, that leads to something else, which is, I may have, admit first common consciousness, I may have a partial insight,
Yes.
which makes me feel, which makes me as an artist, a philosopher, or a scientist. And that may consider as an individual.
Yes, that's the common way of thinking, that is an unusual individual,
Yes.
right? That's the way
Which is a
people think.
partial insight.
Yes.
When there is total, insight, there is no individuality. There is no such thing as individual.
Well, you see,
Gosh,
but
go on, sir.
Let me take another example, sir.
Why do I feel then that I'm different from...
Me,
Why do I feel different from others?
because it's part of your tradition, part of your conditioning, part of your illusion. And another feels I'm different from you. You follow?
Let's come back to the Buddha. You said, at a particular point in time,
Yes. Careful.
he transformed himself and went out of the stream.
No, he didn't transform himself.
All right, sir. A transformation.
You see,
a transformation took place.
place.
All right, sir. I'll be very careful now. A transformation took place. So there was an end to the contents of his consciousness.
He moved. There was certain transformation took place, which means that person. I know what I'm going to say. Go slow. that person threw away the human consciousness.
And I'm saying, sir, that is individual action.
For God's sake.
It has to be, sir.
You stick to it, all right? Then what?
So therefore, individual's action, he didn't change my consciousness in the sense that what happened to him didn't happen to me.
What are you trying to say?
So it only
let's be simple. What are you trying to say?
I'm saying, sir, that something happened to the Buddha, the human being who was...
Wait, a human being who had total insight... Wait, follow me for a little minute. Total insight into the whole nature and structure of consciousness.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Total insight, not partial.
Yes, sir.
And therefore, he's entering into a different dimension.
That's right. And that's right, sir. That shows that human being's consciousness was different from that of another
It's
human
not.
being.
What?
It is,
Wait. Slow. You are saying that human being's consciousness is different from human consciousness.
Yes, sir.
I wouldn't call it consciousness.
So,
It doesn't matter, sir.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, sir, because his, whatever it is, if it's not consciousness, whatever it is different from human consciousness.
All right, for the moment, let's admit, then what?
Then, sir, it shows that an individual, a human person, a separate physical entity.
A human being...
A separate physical entity.
Wait a minute. A human being at any time
Yes, sir.
can step out of this. Right? Kept out of this stream of human consciousness.
When he does that, sir,
Huh?
when a human being does step out of that stream, does he then become an individual? Or does
No,
he become
forget the
an
individual. He doesn't belong to this.
Therefore,
He's not.
Sir, therefore, a human being has to a transformation takes place in a human being, not in this abstract human consciousness one has been talking about.
does that human being stepping out affect the totality of mankind? in
Probably
some
very
way?
little, or little. Because they reduce. Look what happens. There was the Buddha who stepped out of it. What did human beings do? Worship. He did all the contrary things he said don't do. Right?
But, sir, you have the implication of your teaching is that the change must occur in every human being. That will transform life, humanity, mankind.
Right.
So there must be
please,
an effect.
just a minute. Let's. Sir, what are we talking about?
So, what we are saying, sir, is that a human being, a
Sir,
separate physical
look,
entity...
Sir, let us first be clear. Step by step we'll go into this. Do you first admit completely, not as a theory, that human consciousness is made up of its content?
That's
Right. This content is common to all mankind.
No, sir.
Huh?
It is separate.
Wait.
There is a great deal of commonality, but there is also particular individual action which has taken place in that man's life.
No. You see, we are going back.
It has to be, sir, because how does the human being who became the Buddha transformed himself, whereas his disciple Ananda didn't?
Because Ananda, from what one gathers, was a rather silly person.
Therefore, sir, you're distinguished.
No,
between
I'm
individuals.
joking, sir. I'm joking.
No, sir, but seriously.
No, he didn't have total insight into the whole structure.
That's right. So that total insight takes place only in a human being, sir. When consciousness...
Wait, go slow. Yes. What do you mean by total? It took place in the human being.
It can't take place in the abstract, sir. It can,
No. His whole the content of his consciousness.
Yes.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
The content disappeared.
The content disappeared.
Did it disappear in that brain? Would you say?
Huh?
Would you say that this took place in that brain?
Yes.
that brain cleared, right?
Yes.
They cleared up, right?
They cleared up, which means the brain cells themselves
Changed.
mutated,
Yes.
changed, transformed.
Yeah, so let's try to get it then. Here in one brain, something happens. Right?
Yeah.
And then what? Then what? You say it's not consciousness,
No, not as we know it.
but another kind, perhaps.
Something else.
Yeah.
So in order for this transformation to take place, a human consciousness is incarnated in a human body, a transformation takes place, and it is free of human consciousness.
What?
This transformation, which is emptying the brain.
I see. Look, one of the contents of my consciousness is greed. Greed, with all the implications involved in that word. I end that greed. It ends in this consciousness.
Now when you say in this
Not
brain,
in this consciousness. It ends in this brain, sir.
What?
In the brain of this person, that whole structure ends.
Ends, yes.
Right.
Which is part of consciousness.
Yeah, part of the general consciousness.
Yes.
So there has been a change in the general consciousness, but it seems like a small one because only one person, only one brain has taken part.
Are you asking the transformation of one human being affects the rest of mankind?
That's the question. Does it affect all the other brains?
I think it does. Not...
Right.
Yes, sir, it does.
Well, then how? You see that?
I'm going to show you in a minute.
Right.
They were all...
You see, sir, when you say that it affects human consciousness, and when you say...
I know Hitler.
No, sir, when
No, it affects at a totally different level than at the level of a human consciousness.
All right, but
it does... Sorry.
Yes, if it affects at another level, right?
Yeah.
Now, is this effect communicated in the ordinary way, physically, by words, by signs, by some contact, physical connection? You see, we can understand so far that here's one brain, right? This brain has suddenly cleared up.
Yes.
Right? And something new is happening.
Yes.
Now, all the other brains have not changed. Very
No.
Now, then we say somehow they're affected. Are they affected, first of all, in the ordinary physical way by talking, by...
Yes, by literature,
or by writing, talking, television, whatever it is.
Yes. Not yes. Thank God.
Or is there another effect which goes beyond all that?
It goes beyond that.
Yes. And then the next question is, what is the nature of that way? How does it go beyond?
Is that what you're asking?
That's one of the lines of inquiry, sir. But
shall we answer that? Shall we go into that first?
Yes.
By Jove, you're all putting me in a corner, aren't you? Yes, sir, I get it. I get it. You're asking me, a human being moves out of the stream.
Well, it seems to me that the stream dies in him, that
he
dies to the stream.
He dies to the stream.
Yes.
Let's put it that way.
That brain dies to the stream.
And therefore, psychologically, and all the rest of it, he's moved away.
Yes.
Right?
He's not in it now.
He's not in that field. And because he's not in that field, are you asking, does it affect the field?
Yes.
Huh?
Yeah.
And you want to know in what way it affects it. Show us the proof of it.
Well, at least make it clear what it is, right?
Yeah, show us how it affects.
Yeah.
Give me a chance.
Well, it's a difficult question.
No, sir, I think
It's very
I'll show you in a
Why?
minute. I'll show you in a minute. Let me get into the... What do you say?
Well,
What do you say?
well,
No, as two people,
yes.
you, not as a human being, you moved away.
Yeah.
And you lived for 30 years in the physical body. Moving, talking, so on. You are asking that dying to the stream, because you are no longer in that area, do you affect or modify or change that field, that
Yes,
area?
and not merely by talking and
No, of
but
course.
in another way, right?
Of course. Are you also, is this what you are asking? Now, I want to get the question to myself very clear. That because this human being has moved or died to that, does it affect the rest of the consciousness? If it affects that, then Hitler also affects that.
Well, everybody affects everybody then.
Yes.
Right.
But the man who has died to this has a totally different action on the consciousness.
Yes.
Not Hitler, not Stalin's, because the part of this field.
Well, all these people have the effect which is possible within that field.
Field, yeah. If that is clear,
Yeah.
then how is there... What do you mean does it affect mankind?
Well, I could make it simple that here this brain has cleared up. Now, does it increase the possibility of the other brains? Are the other brains changed in some way so that there's a greater possibility of their clearing up?
Or
Yeah.
you have pointed out, as a human being, you have pointed out that it can be done.
Well, that's true. That helps. I mean, but then some people say yes.
That is a tremendous thing.
Yes, but it gets neutralized by people saying he's a unique individual who.
And that, apart from all that rubbish, you have pointed like a great, like Einstein.
Yeah, well, if you have made a discovery, you have shown that if you have transformed one atom, you have shown that all atoms can be transformed, right? Provided that you once accept that they're all basically the same.
Yes, I know. That is,
if you say all the atoms are different, it
not
doesn't
all
help you to
Buddhas.
transform anyone, right?
Go on, sir, with you. Let's hold a minute. I'll come back to that. My brain must... Go on, sir.
So, can I come back? It seems to me that you have very clearly shown that it's the individual who liberates himself from the human consciousness.
What?
It is individual action, sir. Sorry to come back to it. There is a reason I'm coming back to it. Human consciousness hasn't changed. There is an individual who had... Please listen, sir.
I think you're both using the word individually differently.
Yes. A human being has liberated himself from the field of human consciousness.
Yes.
It has to be so.
Yes. I mean, don't use the word for kindly.
Yes.
Don't use the word
Individual. A human being has. Now we are also saying there are other human beings who are operating within the field of consciousness.
Yes.
When certain aspects of this consciousness gets focused and the environment is right, you produce a Hitler. But it is still part of this human consciousness.
That's right.
There is more anger, more
of course,
hate.
it's still part of the field.
Whereas there is another human being, a Buddha, who has stepped out of this.
Yes.
Then the question which was asked was, what is the effect of...
I understand your question. I want to move a little bit from it. I'll come back.
So, therefore, sir, a human beings operate, the way a human being operates is different from the way another human being operates, sir. That's all I'm saying.
Oh yes, surely.
That's all. Now can I speculate a little about what happens? You asked Dr. Bohm the question, what do you think happens when a person stepped out?
Yes, I'm asking you.
Since,
what happens,
yeah.
Narayan? Is that a... Go on, sir, join in this.
Sir, the human being who stepped out of human consciousness cannot be touched by human consciousness.
No.
But does he open a window through which something else can impact this human consciousness and reduce the amount of evil in it?
What's that?
The human being who stepped out of this human consciousness can no longer be affected by it. He's free of it.
He can affect it. Go slowly. We mustn't say affect it.
This human consciousness...
I understand your question,
which
sir.
consists of, if I may put it simply, good and evil. This human consciousness consists of good and evil. This human being has stepped out of it. He can no longer be affected by this human consciousness.
Yes, he's no longer part of it.
No, but by stepping out of it...
Yes, I understand that.
Has he either removed a certain part of the evil of this human consciousness or brought to it a certain goodness?
What is that? No.
Does he reduce the amount of evil in it or increase the amount of good in it by stepping out of it?
Is the effect on the other consciousness within the field of the other consciousness? That's the question.
What you're asking, the same question as he asked.
So I'm speculating because I think the effect could possibly be the reduction of the amount of evil in human consciousness or the increase of the amount of good in it. It's like removing a certain poison out.
Much simpler. You are, as a human being, extraordinarily compassionate. We're using the word with too much. You're compassionate, you're kind, you're generous, and I am not. Do you affect me?
Yes.
Do you? Follow it so careful. Do you?
I am compassionate and you are not.
Yeah.
Of course I affect you.
I question it.
And that's very clear, sir. Of course I affect you.
No, I question it. Do you affect me at all? You may modify me.
Yes, that's what I meant.
You may modify me. You may say, I must be like you. I must become more generous, more kind, more tender. But I'm still within the same field.
Oh, yes, of course, within the field. But there
so wait a minute. So, actually you don't affect me because we are both of us in the same area.
Affect in the sense modify.
Yes. We are both in the same field.
Yes. Yes.
Now, the man who is out of the field, steps out of the field, does he affect us?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
What do you say, Narayan? Go on, join me. Does he affect me? Or do I say I must be like him? I must become Buddha. I must become wise.
It could be both, sir.
Huh?
It could be both.
No. As long as that exists,
then
I must become this, that, the other. I am in this field.
Yes, of course. But when you say, does the person who has stepped out affect me? He does affect me, sir.
I'm questioning that, sir, for the moment. Please move into it. Yield a little.
Again, sir, are you using the word affect different from modify?
Does it radically transform me? That's my question.
That's it. Yes. So affect means radically transform.
Of course, that's what I'm using. Of course not.
No, I thought of it in modify. Okay.
Well, but still, you say it opens the possibility of this radical effect. You say that since the fact that this has happened to this man implies that it can happen to all men.
All it implies.
And insofar as people can see that, they will be radically effective.
No, but I question that.
What? What?
I question that.
I question that too.
Because
Why?
how do I know it has taken place?
All right, that's another question. But
It is just speculation on my part, sir. Isn't that so?
Look, sir, you have moved out, left this field on which we play cricket. And you are no longer belong to this. Whatever you have become or not become, as long as I remain in this field, you cannot affect me.
I didn't understand the question. Which way? A human being has stepped out
You're
of
out.
the field.
You're out.
One person is out,
Out.
the other is in.
Yeah.
You are saying the person who is out cannot affect the person
No.
who is in.
Affect, we are using careful.
Transform.
You cannot transform me. Transformation must take place within the brain
Of the human being.
of the human being. Right, sir?
yes, but you see, then you would say, if you pursue that, it would say that this man is irrelevant to the other.
No, I'm coming to that.
Yes,
Now just
right.
let's go slowly.
Right.
Is he relevant? Is he relevant,
Yes,
first
that's
of
the
all?
question, yes.
Historically, it has become irrelevant. Right?
Well, that's what's happened, yes.
Huh? He's become totally irrelevant to our daily life. Right? I worship him. I say Buddha, Namo, Namaskaram and all the rest of it. But I remain in this area, in this field. Right? I'm using the word effect in the sense, does he, by his moving away from this, dying to this, bring about a radical transformation in consciousness? Obviously not.
Well, not really. By that alone doesn't do it.
What?
That alone does not do it.
Never.
But still, you're saying he's still relevant. Is he relevant?
Does it bring some change in that consciousness? Maybe
Well,
not a
but
radical
That
transformation.
would be irrelevant, you see, because it would only go from one phase to another of
Yeah.
the same thing, you see.
This stream, sir, is always becoming. Let's use that word, including all the rest of it. It is becoming all the time, right? And the person who is led to this, to him this becoming is no meaning. Right? Right? Does does the movement of dying to this affect the becoming of human being? Of course not.
But does it increase in any degree the possibility that
No,
another human
I
being
play this game over and over again. No,
Then,
I
sir, it
refuse
has
to
no
play this game.
meaning you're going around the world for 60 years talking,
Yes.
sir.
Huh?
What's
It
the
has-
good of the Buddha? You're talking. It has no effect, you're saying. You can't mean that.
Probably you're right.
Is the
Just a minute. Unless somebody says, move out of this area totally. He may repeat it umpteen million years. He repeats that.
But it has no effect.
Has it? Unless you move out, unless human beings move out of that area. Now say, actually, sir, Buddha, let's use X as dead to this area. What relevant? What is his? In what way has his movement relevant to our daily life? None.
So that seems to contradict what you were saying a little bit before and what was said in Ojai, that the existence of X outside of the stream does have an effect of some kind.
Just a minute. We must be careful in the book. You see, what effect has it, sir?
Well, we don't...
Just take, suppose you are out of it, you are dead to it, and I've listened to you for 50, 60 years. Have I moved out of that stream?
Maybe you haven't. But the very existence of X...
is that relevant? That's
what
what he's on.
Yeah. It necessarily does.
Is that relevant? Or I live in my own nasty consciousness and modify that because you have come into, said something other, I modify it.
But there might
relevant means actual,
Could there not be an effect other than immediately radically
That's what he was asking.
No, that was one
That's
question,
what we are going round and round this beastly subject.
Yeah, well,
So,
that's one thing.
Let's not talk for the moment about the person who stepped outside. Two human beings who are within this field of human consciousness, between a certain pair of human beings, it doesn't take place between every two human beings. There are moments when an immense change takes place when the two of them are together, sir.
What?
Yes, sir. When two people are together, who deeply feel for each other the same, and are really together with each other, a change does take place.
But are they in the same field?
They are in the same field, but I think for those moments they might not be.
It may be partial.
It may be partial, sir. So
for what?
So I'm coming to it. So human beings who are within this field do affect each other.
Yes.
Affect, sir.
Yeah.
Not modify.
No, felt that.
Yes, sir.
Wait, which means what? They have felt something beyond the human consciousness.
That's right, sir.
But as it being partial,
they go back.
That's
right. Now,
so it has not affected the total consciousness.
Not the total consciousness, but for those moments there was something. Is it possible, when one is related or connected to the human being who stepped outside, that it's much more likely, much more possible that those moments take place?
Why are you asking that question?
Because then the relevance of that human being is...
My question, sir, as Dr. Bohm raised, is it relevant?
It's relevant to the extent that this transformation must take place, and anything which helps it is relevant, sir.
So you are saying X who has stepped out of this area, his relevance is only judged by the effect it has on this consciousness. Right? Apparently it had very little effect.
Could one ask how X came to step out with having the ordinary common human brain?
Either you are entering then, that's quite a different question. How to step out of the stream is quite a different.
If you have just the same common human brains, A, B, C and D.
I don't quite follow that.
X steps out.
Yes. Anybody can step out.
But why did X step out?
Huh?
Why did X step out?
Why? Oh, because he sees the absurdity of the whole structure. He has an insight into the whole nature of consciousness.
Well, is that insight a matter of luck?
No. No. You see, you're going off to something else. That's a different question altogether.
I don't think so. I think it's very relevant.
Is it?
Yes.
Ask them. Is it relevant?
Well, the question would be that if whether other people would be also capable. You see, you might say, what seems to be implied in the question is that maybe X is somehow different from all the others, and that's why he was able to step out. Whereas perhaps...
So if I am as a human being, my only concern is it possible as a human step out of this, die to this? That's all my concern, nothing else. Because as long as I live in this, as a human being in this area, suffering is endless. Right?
Well, the question is whether all of this sort of questions is going to help in stepping out.
Yes, sir, that's what I'm saying. Does he help?
Well,
you understand where that leads?
Yeah.
If somebody outside is going to help me, you understand what is implied in all that? I'll pray to him, I'll worship him, I'll enter into the same old game.
Yeah. Well, we don't mean help in that sense, but does it help in any sense at all? That is, does it make it more possible for another person to change in any way at all, you see?
What do you say to sir?
Well...
no, apply your scientific brain. What do you say?
Well, you see, the evidence...
Be very actual.
Yes, you see, the evidence you've given is that it makes no change, you see, but...
Yeah.
On the other hand, if somebody steps out, then... and since he's seeing this illusion...
You have stepped out of it.
Yeah.
You keep on telling me and my common humanity, step out of it. You're telling me that all the time, right? That's all you're telling me. And step out of it, and so on. You explain how to, etc. But I don't step out of it. Right? Occasionally, a strange event takes place, a man has stepped out of it. But my common ground is this. So I'm not concerned. If I'm really concerned, I would break through this. Our human mind is so conditioned to adjust itself and modify itself to something greater than itself. And so reduce the greater to its small, petty little entity. That's what historically is happening all the time. Or stepping out of that stream implies intelligence and compassion, right? Right?
That brings us in a circle. That brings us into a circle.
Wait. No, I'm trying to say that intelligence and compassion may affect this.
Yes.
Affect. It is like a... No, that doesn't sound right. I
No,
withdraw that.
But are you saying that there is an intelligence and compassion involved in stepping out?
Yes.
But that can go beyond that brain which has stepped out somehow.
Yeah.
As it were, there's a communication of intelligence and compassion.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Well, are we meeting anything at all?
Are you saying that you either stepped out or you are in it?
That's all.
That's Is it possible to be in it but have moments where you have stepped out?
Yes, occasional glimpse through a narrow little hole.
It's possible, isn't it?
No, we all have it.
Yes. So that is perhaps the relevance of this.
Huh?
That is perhaps the relevance of this person who has stepped out.
You mean has that person who has stepped out opened the window for me, for us? See, again you're bringing the whole thing to somebody doing this for me.
Not somebody doing it for me, somebody creating a certain...
Well, whatever you would like to say.
It has to be a human being has to interact with his environment the whole time, sir. If in that environment there is this person, it's much more likely.
We'll go back to the game again.
But that is so, isn't it, sir?
It is so. Because our minds refuse to bring about a total mutation.
Because we don't in any way seem to be in contact with the intelligence and compassion which alone can bring it about.
What's that?
Because we don't seem ourselves to be in contact with the intelligence and compassion which you say is necessary.
No, because we are not as intelligent.
The intelligence and compassion is not then within the stream of normal human consciousness.
Wait a minute. No. Quite right.
Well, that puts us in the soup, rather.
This, we are saying the same thing round and round.
Krishnaji, you were saying just a couple of minutes ago that there is a quality of affection or communication because of this
Scott,
person
my
who
only
stepped out.
concern is not whether the Buddha stepped out of the stream, or somebody else has stepped. I am stuck here, in this area. Is it possible for a human being like me get out of it? That is relevant. But when you introduce these three words, degeneration, regeneration, that I understand. It is possible to totally change the very structure of the brain cells. We discussed this. When there is total insight, the brain cells have transformed themselves. Rejuvenate, whatever word you like to use. So, as a human being, is it possible not to modify the content, but move away from it? Right, sir? See, reincarnation means what? Incarnate, over again. Right? Incarnate what? The same pattern.
Yes.
Same pattern repeated.
Yes.
That's all. I wouldn't... You see, that means what?
The consciousness which was left behind when that body died.
Consciousness of mankind,
Yes.
being repeated, manifesting itself,
In another body. Yes.
Another instrument. That's all.
When it manifests itself in another instrument, the possibility of regeneration, renewal is much more, because it's a new body, so much more energy.
What?
See, when the body becomes old, going back to this, there is senility, not only in the brain but the muscles, physically, the whole body becomes less energetic, less able, less alert. When the body dies, that consciousness, if it reincarnates in another body, the The other body is much younger. It's new body. The energy.
See what he's getting at,
This is
sir?
the
The good old stuff coming out.
No, but
The consciousness. It's maybe
You
another
see,
kind
you
No,
are
but
not
it is
moved
so.
away from
another
that.
portion of consciousness in the new body. It won't
I'm not
be
sure.
The same recipe
Well,
of the old
See,
one.
is there
not
something
sure.
that, see, I think it's assumed in there that there's something which retains its identity, as it goes from one incarnation to another, right?
Yes, I'm saying that.
No. You see that? What is that? Incarnates.
The consciousness,
Which is common to mankind, which is greed and blah, blah, all the rest of it, manifests itself.
I mean, all particular memories are wiped out completely.
What do you mean particularity?
Of that, the consciousness at the time of death had certain particular memories. Not only that man's life, his experience.
All right, what are those man's memories, remembrances?
Yes.
What? His experiences. Well, his experiences of what? Pain, pleasure, suffering.
So there was a certain balance between various emotions in his life.
Which means, yes, all right, harmony. Huh?
There was a certain degree of violence, certain degree of
Yes,
goodness.
that's common to mankind.
Now, yes. Does that go back into human consciousness?
You see, sir,
No, but,
he does.
It's a different teaspoon.
No.
Goes to the next part.
no, I'm questioning that.
But I think...
What happens, sir?
Huh?
What happens? Is it a different...
Sir,
teaspoon?
either you have no qualities of that consciousness, and therefore there is no rebirth, or you're
You're out of it.
out of it. As long as those qualities which make up the consciousness remain, I'm part of the rest.
I think that, many of the people who believe in reincarnation would think something like this, that the memories, they agree the memories are entirely in the brain, and the next life you don't have those memories. But they believe there is something which persists, which, as it were, gains in virtue and strength by meeting the challenges of this life, so that by the time you come to the next life,
You're much stronger.
You're stronger, and you meet.
Yes, sir.
But you don't remember it. You see.
Yeah,
you see,
yes,
that's not
you're
right.
much stronger, you're much richer, you're much
That's,
better.
that's right. So eventually you reach the right level, and now that implies that there is a separate individual who has an identity, right?
I know this.
Yes. Now,
So, which means identification with what?
with that qualities of strength, or potentiality of gaining that virtue and strength.
Yes, sir, I know this.
That's what they identify. They identify.
That's
with.
what you call individual.
That if I take that point of view, that's what I mean by the individual. I say that the particular memories I have in this life, well, they'll go, and in another life I'll have an entirely different set. All that doesn't matter, you see. But I will be, in some way, a more virtuous and stronger individual because of what I have done in the
Yes,
previous
sir,
life.
I know this.
Carry a scorecard along.
Well, not exactly. You change in, like when you do something, you sort of, it's not merely what you remember, but it's part of you that, that you gain this strength, right?
It's called celestial double entry bookkeeping.
Yeah.
What's that?
Karma, celestial double entry bookkeeping, the good and the bad, they keep score.
No, but
Yes, I'm not talking of the Hindu
No,
theory.
it's like somebody has lived a healthy life, and you see, his body is strong not because he remembers how he lived, but rather it has produced that strong body, right? So they say you have the strong soul which has lived through many lives and can now meet the new life, right?
Yes, sir.
So in that view, they would say that is my individuality, and all these other things are somewhat
Sir,
accidental, right?
Sir, wait a minute. That means what? A continuous becoming.
That's right. Continually getting better or worse, right?
Becoming.
Yes.
Is there such thing as becoming?
Well, that's a question. You see, it looks, certainly physically, one sees becoming, right?
Yes, I
One
know.
sees one thing becoming another. Now,
Is there psychologically a becoming?
Yes. Well, it appears that, I don't say there is, but it appears at first sight that there is.
I know there is. That's what we assume.
Yes.
That's one of our pet theories that we're all becoming.
Yes, and so I think one has to refute this notion of becoming. You see,
That's what I'm attacking.
Yes. So how would you show that there is no becoming?
I say there is no becoming.
Yeah, but how would you say why?
Why, I'll show you.
Right.
Psychologically, because physically I become something.
We can become older again.
Yeah.
Stronger,
So
weaker.
Psychologically, I carried over that
Yes.
into the psychological field.
That's exactly what's happened, and also going from one life to another.
Yes,
the same
yes.
idea.
So may I ask another question? If a human being steps out of this human consciousness, and you say that it doesn't affect this human consciousness.
I never said it doesn't. I said...
You questioned whether it did. You did.
Huh?
You questioned whether...
I questioned.
You questioned. And you even said it appears as if it has no effect. Supposing all human beings stepped out of this human consciousness. No, please, sir. What would happen to this human consciousness? Because each person stepping out doesn't...
totally different.
No, sir, because the person who stepped out doesn't affect it. So even if everyone stepped out, what happens to it then?
That's like the layer of the onion skins and what happens when you remove all
But there's no answer to that.
No. There has to be, so therefore it must affect this consciousness.
All right, sir. If it does, why haven't human beings, after 10 million years, transformed themselves? You understand? You're all stepped out of the stream, all of you, and I'm not. I carry on my own way. I see what marvelous people you are. I put garlands across myself and do all that, but I'm going to carry on myself, my own way. Perhaps you modify. You may say I must be more gentle and kind and generous. All right, but I am still within that area.
Now, you think it's very important to step out of this field.
That is the only thing that matters.
And that is why, sir, if I may come back to it, question of reincarnation becomes important. I will tell you how, sir. If I, listening to you, say that there is something this human being is saying which is very, very important, I feel it's very important.
That is the only thing in matters.
Only thing that matters. That's the only thing that matters. Right? I could be killed in an accident.
What?
I could be killed in an accident tomorrow.
Yes.
Why should
Hope not. Yes.
Why should I try to do anything?
What?
Why should I?
No, that's not.
No, sir, it is.
No,
it is important, sir.
Asit's point is that should I be killed in an accident tomorrow, there's no chance for me to work this out.
You are still sticking to the nonsensical idea that you are separate.
No, sir, please, let me put it another. Why should I end my own suffering? Why should I?
Don't.
No. You are saying it's important to do so. Why are you saying this?
Well, what do you mean, why am I saying it?
You've been saying, for the last 50 years, you've been telling people...
55.
Step out of this. They don't. Okay. Now look at it from the person who's on the other side, who listens to you. Okay? Why should he, as you say, work at it?
Because you suffer. Because you see the consequences of your greed.
That's right.
You see the consequences of your attachment.
That's right. And then I die and it all ends.
What?
And then I die and it all ends.
All right. You see, he's still...
I have to go into it, because if it ends at that point, sir, then there's no need for me to transform myself.
But you wouldn't be suffering now if you stepped out. I mean, why do you have to have a reward in the hereafter?
Why do I want...
it for its own sake now?
No, No, it is the reward in the now. The stepping out is because I want to not have suffering. So that you see the point of the reward
I think,
now?
And they're not playing this game consistently. You see that they say either you have to say that you are an individual, or you say you're not. Right? If you're not an individual, then all that's irrelevant. That you see, suppose you say that the whole brain contains many cells. You see, if one dies, then one dies. That's all. You see, that's a different attitude. You see that.
I'm saying that unless you have the idea of reincarnation, the stepping out loses meaning.
No, because
you see, you're thinking in terms of reward.
Well, of the individual being rewarded.
Sir, the stepping out is reward. Why would I want to step out?
Oh no!
Why would I want to step out?
No, stepping out is not a reward. For God's sake.
There's nothing to reward.
There is. The end of suffering. Why would I want to step out otherwise? Sir?
Don't.
No, sir, but you are telling us step out. See suffering and the end of suffering. See fear and the end of fear.
Yeah. End it.
End it. I want to end suffering and fear for obvious reasons.
But you want to continue pleasure.
No, just see. And somebody says it's possible to end suffering and end fear and step out. My wanting to step out is because I want to end suffering and fear.
No.
That's the reward.
No.
You see the reward? How subtly reward
He doesn't say ending fear is stepping out of the stream. He says all this total consciousness is related to each other. Greed, envy, pleasure, fear, suffering, they're all one movement.
Yes.
They're not, we have separated them.
Yes, sir. But the person who listens to you, quite frankly, would be interested in stepping out only because it leads to the ending of fear and suffering. Is that
the
so?
Man says, if there is a motive to end fear, fear will continue.
Yes, sir. So that's where it becomes very subtle and complex. But
Of course.
yes.
If my brain is cuckoo dull, I won't up. I listen to you, it means nothing.
But in the beginning, when one listens to you, the wanting to step out is because one wants to end suffering and fear.
But
Then when you go into the ending of suffering and fear, this comes in the motivation itself.
But he says, don't have more.
I know.
Well, I don't know if the ending is to get rid of suffering and fear, but the point is the whole structure is irrational, and it's like saying hold on to a contradiction or give it up. You see.
I wonder if there was no suffering or fear in my life that I would want to step out of it.
There is no such human being.
That's right, sir.
Like some man told me the other day, between my wife and myself, there is no conflict.
That's right, sir. So the motive is
Sounded so silly.
Of course. So the motive is there, sir. The ending of suffering and fear.
Well, look, the reason for suffering and fear is conflict and contradiction.
The reason is conflict and contradiction.
Yes.
But why am I investigating the reason for suffering and fear?
Well,
because I want to end it.
No, not necessarily, because you want to end contradiction. You see, the point is that...
Why do I want to end contradiction?
Well, it's just absurd to go on with it. Why should one want to go on with absurdity?
Sir, he says over and over again, stepping out is not a reward.
I know, sir, but...
But you see what we have done? He says one thing, but we have modified what he says to suit ourselves.
But one must accept what human existence is. There is suffering, there is fear. There's great fear of suffering. And there's a lot of suffering from
They're
fear.
all one movement.
One movement. It is in
Have an insight into the whole movement, and to have insight, no motive, no reward and punishment.
That is the problem, sir.
Of course.
Because one goes into this only to end it, and wanting to end it is the motive, sir.
Of course.
So how do you separate the motive from the wanting to end it, sir? Wanting to end it.
You see the nature of motives.
You don't just stick with where you came in.
You can't catch me out there.
So, not catching you out, sir, but there would be a
joking.
Yes, but you see, it becomes an endless circle. There would be a motive in trying to investigate the nature of motive.
Much more interesting what he was asking.
Yeah.
What relationship has the man who stepped out and to common humanity? You follow? The Christians have done a very clever trick about this. The man who has stepped out suffered for us, so through him we can be, all that business. That's the Hindus do it in another way, right? But actually, in our daily life, has that man who has stepped out, or woman who stepped out, transform our lives? That's the real question. Obviously not. So I'm not, as a human being, I'm not seeing that. I'm not concerned whether who has stepped out. I'm concerned not as a reward and punishment, as a motive, a direction, all that. I'm concerned whether it's possible to transform the whole structure of my brain. Right, sir? Which means, can I have a total insight into the whole of it? Which means, is it possible to end time? Right?
Well, that's a bit of a jump.
Yes.
See, you said my concern. You said three things about what my concern should be. My concern is not with the person who has stepped out.
No,
that's clear. You said three things. My concern should be: is it possible to transform my brain?
No,
that should not be my concern.
No, wait. Is it my concern? We're using the word for a moment. To bring about a transformation in the pattern of my brain.
No, sir. That should not be my concern.
It is, basically.
No, sir. My concern should...
Right, sir?
No, sir, because...
I don't see the question yet. I mean, what...
I'll tell you why, sir. My concern can validly only be to have insight into the processes of my brain, and not to transform it.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're quite right. But I said, to have that insight, which will transform the brain structure and so on.
That may happen. I don't know that. You might.
I say it will. You do it.
Yes. So
which means what? My brain, human brain, has been conditioned for centuries, millennia, which took time. Evolution means time. And it's caught in that pattern. You understand? And I'm saying to myself, I see this. Therefore I ask, is that pattern, can that pattern be broken completely?
No, sir. I think that would be the wrong question if I'm
very humbly delighted.
I can only ask, can I understand what the pattern?
What?
Can I understand the pattern?
Oh yes, I've understood it. Immediately when I've asked, my brain is the result of time and is caught in a pattern of time, becoming.
So if I start...
Wait, that's what I've said. There's a pattern of time in which the brain is caught. From one insecurity to another insecurity, or thinking that's and so on, various forms of becoming, which is time. To understand this whole nature of this pattern, there must be insight, which means no motive, no direction, no from a center observing, and so on, so on. if you have insight into this whole pattern, you have broken the pattern. And wait. Are you then saying to yourself, I'm out of this stream? You can't. You're not even conscious that you're out of this stream. I don't know if I'm making...
No, sir.
I
don't follow.
Well, it couldn't be. If you were conscious of yourself as separate, you would have to be in the stream.
Of course. That's just it.
But
moment you say, when you say I'm out of the stream, you're part of the stream.
What you're saying is the consciousness of the I doesn't exist, and therefore you can't make that statement. But that for us is, speculation at the moment. I think the only valid question is to understand what's going on. Not to end time, not to break the pattern, not to do all those things. Just to understand.
I see, when you tell me our brain is evolved in time and caught in the pattern of time, which is becoming, and I see it immediately. I see the whole meaning of it, the consequences of it. That I have an insight into this becoming. Endless time. Which includes reincarnation, everything. So as we were discussing with Dr. Bohm the other few weeks ago, can that time end? Can this pattern be broken? That pattern is knowledge, right? And somebody comes along and says it can be broken, and it is to see immediately the nature of it. Which means not allow thought with its remembrances and mood enter into that perception. Which means observation is not of time. Full stop. But have we answered, sir, the question?
Which question?
Question. Is the mind the universe? Remember we were talking about?
Yes.
Remember?
Well, saying the mind and the universe and what's beyond.
I know. That's what's... Well, sir, what's happened to your reincarnation? Right? The whole thing's so wrong, really.
What is wrong, sir?
Time. What time is it?
Yes, we had long.
Huh?
It's 5 minutes past 6.
Oh, good.
The supper gong just went.
Supper gong went?
Yes, I didn't hear it.
Yes, we heard it just now.
Oh, I didn't get over here.
We'll go to supper. Isn't it Shakespeare is supposed to have said, time must have a stop?
Yes, that was Shakespeare,
Huh?
yeah.
That's right.
Huh?
Shakespeare said that.
Yeah.
He also said time is thought.
Hmm?
He also said time is thought's
Yeah.
food.
Mm.
What? Should we get up or sit still?